The Italian mafia boss found his rival's beaten wife. "You're coming with me." The cigar smoke in the private room was so thick it seemed to hold the dim, amber light in place. Enzo Moretti watched the smoke curl toward the ceiling, his face an unreadable mask of cold civility. Across the polished mahogany table, 3 of Chicago's finest city officials shifted in their leather chairs, their forced smiles melting under the pressure. "Enzo, you have to understand our position." One of them, a man named Henderson with a network of broken capillaries on his nose, pleaded weakly. "The permits for the new riverfront properties, they're complex." "Complex," Enzo repeated. His voice was quiet, a low rumble that vibrated with absolute control. It was a voice that never needed to be raised. It carried the weight of his reputation. "You mean expensive? You mean the price we discussed last month has suddenly inflated by, what was it, 30%? The man sweated, dabbing at his upper lip with a cocktail napkin. "Inflation, Enzo. It's everywhere." Enzo let the silence stretch, a tactic he'd mastered before he was 20. He let them feel the void, let them fill it with their own mounting panic. He was the head of the Moretti family, a position he had secured with blood, steel, and a mind that saw 3 moves ahead of everyone else. He did not tolerate being played, especially by amateurs in city-issued suits. He finally leaned forward, just an inch, and the 3 men flinched. "Here is what I understand. I understand that my family has operated businesses in this city for 70 years. I understand that we provide incentives for the city to run smoothly. And I understand," he added, his dark eyes landing on each of them in turn, "that you 3 gentlemen are about to make a very poor career choice." He let the threat hang, light as the smoke, but just as choking. After another 10 seconds of suffocating silence, Henderson cracked. Perhaps we misread the figures. We can honor the original agreement." Enzo nodded once, a sharp, dismissive gesture. "My consigliere will finalize it. Get out!" They scrambled, their relief palpable, snatching up their briefcases and muttering obsequious goodbyes. Enzo remained seated, listening to their footsteps fade down the carpeted hallway of Il Corvo, his flagship club. He didn't move until his second-in-command, Leo, stepped silently into the room. "All settled, boss?" Leo asked, his beefy frame filling the doorway. "For now." Enzo stubbed out his cigar. The negotiation already erased from his mind. It was just business. He stood, adjusting the cuffs of his bespoke, charcoal gray suit. He was a tall man, built with a lean, coiled power that his tailoring only hinted at. "I'm leaving. See that the back alley is clear." He preferred the alley exit. It was private, secure, and led directly to his armored sedan. He stepped out of the club's heavy steel door into the biting November air, the smell of the river, grease from a nearby diner, and damp concrete filled his lungs. The alley was narrow, lit by a single, flickering fluorescent light that cast everything in a sickly yellow-green. His car was idling 20 feet away, 2 of his men standing beside it, and that's when he saw it. At first, it was just a shape, a heap of rags slumped against the far wall, next to the overflowing dumpsters, a vagrant, probably. He was about to step past it when the shape moaned. Enzo stopped, his guards tensed, hands moving inside their coats. "Boss," Leo said, stepping in front of him. "Wait!" The shape moved again, pushing itself away from the wall with a trembling arm. It wasn't rags. It was a woman. She stumbled into the weak cone of light, and the sight made Enzo's blood run cold. She was wearing the tattered remains of a silk cocktail dress, one that might have been emerald green but was now dark with stains. She was barefoot, her feet cut and bleeding on the grimy pavement. Her dark hair was matted with something wet, and when she looked up, her face was a geography of pain. Her lip was split, one eye was swelling shut, and a constellation of fresh, purple bruises was already blooming along her jaw and throat. She shook, a violent, uncontrollable tremor that was part cold and part terror. Enzo's breath caught. He knew that face. He had not seen it in 5 years, not since the papers had been full of her wedding announcement, but he knew it. The high cheekbones, the almond-shaped eyes, the mouth that, even bruised, held a defiant curve. It was Ariana Russo, the wife of Dario Russo, his most hated rival, a sadistic new-money gangster who had been clawing at the edges of Moretti territory for years. "Christ," Leo whispered, recognizing her at the same moment. "Boss, it's a trap. It has to be." He put his hand on Enzo's chest, trying to push him back toward the door. Dario's playing some kind of sick game. Enzo's mind, usually so clear, was a storm. A trap? Possible. But the blood was real. The terror in her eyes was not faked. This was not a game. This was a disposal. "Boss, we walk away," Leo insisted, his voice low and urgent. "We don't touch this. She's Russo's wife. It's his business." But Enzo's gaze was locked on her. She was whimpering now, her back to the wall as if expecting a blow. She looked at the men, at their dark suits and hard faces, and her terror deepened. She thought they were here to finish the job. "No," Enzo said, his voice flat. "Enzo, for God's sake, she's the enemy." "Bring her to me," Enzo ordered, his eyes never leaving Ariana. "Boss, now, Leo," Leo cursed, but he obeyed. He and the other guard, Marco, moved toward her. Ariana saw them coming and screamed, a thin, raw sound that was swallowed by the alley. "No, please, no more. I won't tell anyone. I promise, please." She tried to run, but her legs gave out, and she collapsed onto the pavement, sobbing. Leo and Marco stopped, looking back at Enzo, their distaste clear. Enzo walked past them. He crouched down, a few feet from her, so he wouldn't tower. He kept his hands visible, resting them on his knees. "Ariana," he said. Her head snapped up. Her one good eye widened in confusion, and then, in a new, more profound wave of fear, she recognized him. "Moretti," she breathed, and she scrambled backward, scraping her bare back against the rough brick. "Get away from me! You're just like him! Get away!" "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle, a tone he rarely used. "Liar!" she spat, though it was undercut by a sob. "You're all the same. Please, just let me go. I'll disappear." "She's not worth this, boss," Leo grumbled from behind him. Enzo ignored him. He looked at the trembling woman who was Dario Russo's wife, the long-forgotten wife. As the rumors went, Dario paraded models and actresses, but his wife was kept locked away. Now, Enzo saw, she was simply his punching bag. "You're wrong," Enzo said to her, his voice still quiet. "I'm not like him, and you are not going to disappear." "Why?" she cried. "So you can use me? So you can send a message to him? I'm not a prize. I'm not a piece of property." "I know what you are," Enzo said. He leaned in, and his next words were for her alone. "You're the woman who called my private line 5 years ago. You're the voice that said, 'He's waiting for you at the warehouse on Cermak. It's a setup.' You saved my life, Ariana." She froze. Her sobs hitched. Her one good eye stared at him, the fog of pain and panic clearing just enough for memory to surface. I don't—" "You did," Enzo said, ending her denial. "And I don't owe anyone except you. I'm repaying the debt. Right now." He stood up, shrugging off his heavy wool overcoat. He didn't drop it on her. He bent down and wrapped it around her shaking shoulders. It swallowed her. She clutched at the lapels, her knuckles white. "Leo, pick her up. Don't make it hurt." Leo looked like he wanted to argue, but the finality in Enzo's tone stopped him. With a heavy sigh, he moved forward. Ariana flinched, but she was too weak, too shocked to fight. Leo scooped her up with a surprising gentleness, her small, broken form held easily in his massive arms. "My car," Enzo ordered, turning. "Marco, you ride with Leo. Get her in the back with me." "Boss, where are we taking her?" Leo asked, jogging to keep up. "Home." The Moretti penthouse was a fortress of glass, steel, and silence, occupying the top 2 floors of a building Enzo owned. It overlooked the dark, glittering expanse of the city and the black void of the lake. Ariana had been silent the entire ride, lapsing into a semi-conscious state. Enzo carried her from the car himself, sweeping past his startled doorman and into his private elevator. He laid her down on the king-sized bed in the largest of the 4 guest suites. The room was all cream and beige, a sterile, soft prison. Her filth and blood were a stark violation of the pristine white duvet. "Leo, get Dr. Bianchi. Tell him it's a code red. I want him here in 10 minutes. No hospital, no records." "And her?" Leo nodded at the woman, who was curled on her side, clutching Enzo's coat. "She's my guest. Post guards at the elevator and at her door. No one in, no one out. Not even cleaning staff. Understood?" "Understood, boss." Enzo stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching her. He felt a cold, familiar anger rising in his chest. It was the same rage he'd felt as a boy, watching his own father. He'd sworn he would never be that man, and he had a special, visceral hatred for men who were... Dario Russo had just moved from a business rival to a personal one. The doctor came and went, a discreet, gray-haired man who knew better than to ask questions. He stitched her lip, cleaned her cuts, and diagnosed a concussion, 2 cracked ribs, and severe bruising. He gave her a sedative and left painkillers. Enzo dismissed the guards, telling them to wait down the hall. He took the chair from the desk and placed it near her bed, and he sat. He worked from his phone, his face lit by the blue-white glow, handling the night's receipts, responding to his captains, and setting in motion a quiet, intense investigation into Dario's movements. But his attention was not on the screen. It was on the small, measured breaths of the woman in the bed. He must have dozed. He woke to the sound that had haunted his own childhood. A muffled scream, a desperate, breathless no. Ariana was sitting bolt upright, her eyes wide and blind with terror. She was fighting the sheets, kicking her legs, her hands up as if to ward off a blow. "No, Dario, please. I'm sorry, please." Enzo was out of the chair in an instant. He didn't touch her. "Ariana." She didn't hear him. She was still in the alley, still with Dario. "Ariana," he said, his voice sharper. "You're safe. He's not here." His voice finally broke through. She gasped, her head snapping toward the sound, her eyes focused on his silhouette against the city lights. The terror didn't fade. It just transferred. "Who? Where?" "You're in my home. You're safe." He kept his distance, standing at the foot of the bed. "Safe?" She laughed, a broken, hysterical sound. "I'm in Enzo Moretti's penthouse. That's not safe. That's just a different cage. He can't get to you here." That was the wrong thing to say. The dam of her control, shattered by the nightmare, finally broke. It was not a gentle weeping. It was a storm, a raw, guttural wail of years of accumulated pain, fear, and humiliation. She bent in half, clutching her patched-up ribs, and just sobbed. Enzo's resolve, his carefully constructed distance, fractured. He moved to the bed and sat on the edge. She flinched, pulling away. "I'm not going to touch you," he said softly. But her breakdown was too complete. She was unraveling, and she reached out, not for him, but for anything. Her hand fisted in the front of his shirt, and she pulled herself toward him, burying her face in his chest, her sobs muffling against the expensive fabric. Enzo froze. He was a man of calculated action, of violence and control. This, comforting a broken woman, was a language he did not speak. Awkwardly, tentatively, he raised his arms. He didn't pat her back. He didn't stroke her hair. He just held her. He became a solid, immovable object, a shield against the world, and let her cry. He sat in the dark, his suit jacket absorbing her tears, and listened. When the sobs finally subsided into shuddering breaths, she spoke, her voice muffled and raw against his chest. He locked me out. Of the accounts. 2 weeks ago, said I was spending too much. Her voice was flat. Dead. I had to ask the housekeeper for money for tampons. He thought it was funny. Enzo's jaw tightened so hard, a muscle pulsed. Then tonight, his new girl. She laughed at my dress. He didn't like that. He said I embarrassed him. She was pulling away now, wiping at her face with the back of her hand, but she didn't let go of his shirt. He told me he was going to teach me a lesson. He dragged me out of the party, threw me in the car, drove to the club. Your club. He likes the irony. He beat me in the alley behind your club. He said he was leaving me for the rats. For your men to find." She was finished. She had revealed fragments, just the edges of a life lived in terror, but it was enough. Enzo's fury was a cold, clean thing. He now understood. This wasn't a disposal. It was a message. Dario had left her on Enzo's doorstep deliberately, a piece of his property, broken, to show Enzo how little he cared, to show that he could defile his own wife in Moretti territory and suffer no consequences. "You need to rest," Enzo said, his voice thick. She looked at him, her face a ruin in the moonlight. "What happens now?" Enzo stood, pulling her hand from his shirt and placing it gently on the duvet. He looked down at her, the woman who had saved him and was now destroyed by his rival. "Now, you rest," he said. "We'll talk in the morning." He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. "Moretti," he faced her. "If I stay here, if he finds out I'm with you, he will kill you. Or you will have to kill him. He won't see this as a rescue. He will see it as a theft." Enzo's face was stone. "I know what it means. It's a declaration of war." Ariana pushed her matted hair out of her face. A sliver of the woman she had been. The woman who had dared to make that phone call 5 years ago glinted in her one good eye. "Good," she whispered, her voice like ice and broken glass. "Then I want war. I want to be free of him, and if this is the only way, I want him to burn." Enzo stared at her, seeing not the victim in the bed, but the survivor. He gave a single, sharp nod. "Get some sleep. Ariana, the guards are outside. They are there to protect you." He left her then, closing the door with a soft click. He didn't see her again until the next evening. He had given her space, letting her sleep off the sedatives and the pain. He found her standing by the great glass windows, staring at the city lights. She was wearing a silk robe he'd had one of his housekeepers leave for her. She had washed her hair, and it fell in dark, damp waves down her back. The bruises on her face were a violent, stark purple and black. She didn't turn when he entered. "It's a long way down. Don't get any ideas," he said, his voice neutral. "I'm not a prisoner?" she asked, finally looking at him. "You're a guest with guards, a guest who is in danger." He was holding a tray. He set it down on the coffee table, a simple dish of pasta pomodoro, a glass of water, a fork. "You need to eat." She looked at the food, her stomach clenching. "I'm not hungry." "You will eat," he said. It was not a request. She sighed, her shoulders slumping, and sat on the edge of the sofa. He sat in the armchair opposite her, not leaving. She picked up the fork, her hand trembling. After a moment, he got up, went to the tray, and picked up the other fork he'd brought for himself. He sat down again, this time on the sofa, a few feet from her. He speared a bit of pasta and ate it. They ate in silence. The only sounds were the soft clinking of silverware against porcelain and the distant hum of the city 20 floors below. It was the most bizarre, domestic moment of his life, sitting here, eating pasta with his rival's battered wife. She finished half the bowl and set it down. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's just pasta. For everything." He just nodded. The silence stretched again, but it was different now, less tense. She was exhausted, her eyelids drooping. A single strand of her dark, clean hair fell forward, brushing the livid bruise on her cheek. He didn't think. He wasn't the kind of man given to soft gestures, but his hand moved on its own. He reached out, his calloused fingertips, the hand of a killer and a boss, brushing that wisp of hair. He tucked it gently, carefully behind her ear. His fingers grazed the skin of her cheek. Just for a second, her breath hitched. Her eyes, heavy with sleep and pain, snapped open and met his. She didn't flinch. She didn't pull away. She just watched him. Her gaze suddenly, searingly intense. Enzo's own pulse kicked. He saw, for the first time, the woman. Not the wife, not the victim. The moment was charged, heavy with unspoken things. He felt an urge he hadn't felt in years, not just desire, but a protective, primal pull that terrified him more than any war. He pulled his hand back as if he'd been burned. He stood abruptly, his face closing off, the mask of the dawn sliding back into place. "Rest," he said, his voice gruff. He turned and walked out of the room, leaving her alone with the city lights and the echo of a touch that had changed everything. For 2 days, Enzo moved like a ghost in his own home. He spent his hours in his study, a room of dark wood and soundproofed walls, handling the fallout of his decision. The city was a network of whispers, and he was listening to all of them. "He's looking," Leo reported, standing stiffly in front of Enzo's desk on the second morning. "But he's looking in the wrong places." Enzo leaned back, his chair releasing a low groan. Define wrong places. His own operation. He's tearing his own crews apart. He thinks one of his lieutenants let her go, or maybe sold her off to settle a debt. He's been to 3 of his warehouses, cracked a few heads. He's bleeding his own people. "He hasn't gone to the police," Enzo stated. It wasn't a question. "Of course not. How does he report that? My wife, the one I beat and left in an alley, is missing. He's treating it as an internal matter." Leo paused. "He doesn't suspect you. Not yet. He thinks this is a betrayal from within. He's angry, but he's not pointed. He has no idea where she is." "Good." Enzo's eyes drifted to the security feed on the small monitor beside his desk. It showed the main living area. Ariana was there, standing by the window, motionless. She'd been standing there for an hour. "Keep listening. I want to know the second he even thinks my name." "Boss," Leo said, his voice dropping. "The longer she stays, the more certain it is he will think your name. This is a match in a gas-filled room. I'm aware—" "Leo." Enzo's voice was cold steel. "Get back to work." Leo left, and the heavy study door clicked shut. In the living room, Ariana jumped, a violent, full-body flinch. She dropped a glass earlier when the elevator chimed. She flinched every time a door closed. She was a prisoner of sound. For 48 hours, she had explored the penthouse, but not with curiosity. She moved with the cautious, silent tread of a mouse, testing the edges of a new, luxurious trap. The space was enormous, all cool marble, dark woods, and windows that showcased the city like a living painting, but it was a cage. She was terrified of her own reflection. The mirrors in the guest bathroom were large, unforgiving. The bruises on her face were fading from angry purple to a sickly, mottled yellow and green. Her split lip was healing, but it was tight and stiff. She didn't see Ariana. She saw the thing Dario had made, a broken, ugly creature. She avoided the mirrors, catching her reflection only in the black, dead screens of the televisions or the polished steel of the refrigerator. She was healing, but she was starving. She hadn't eaten since the pasta, 2 nights ago. She was afraid to go into the kitchen, afraid to open the refrigerator, afraid of being seen, of taking something that wasn't hers. That was how Dario had trained her. Everything was his, and she had to ask permission. On the 3rd day, Enzo found her in the same spot by the window, wearing the same silk robe she'd been in since she arrived. She looked pale, her skin almost translucent. "You're fading," he said, his voice startling her. She turned, clutching the robe tighter. I'm fine. No, you're not." He was impatient. He was a man who solved problems, and she was a problem he couldn't grasp. "You need clothes. You need to eat. You need to look like a person, not a ghost." His words were harsher than he intended, but they came from a place of frustrated practicality. An hour later, a woman arrived. She was in her 50s, impeccably dressed, with a kind, professional smile. She was followed by 2 assistants wheeling racks of clothes into the living room. "Ariana, this is Sophia," Enzo said, gesturing. "She'll get you whatever you need." Ariana stared at the racks. They were full of clothes. Cashmere sweaters, silk blouses, dark denim, soft-looking trousers, and 2 simple, elegant dresses. Sophia stepped forward, her smile warm. "It is a pleasure." Enzo said to bring things that are comfortable, but also strong. "Shall we start with the basics?" Sophia held up a sweater. A beautiful, deep forest green. Ariana just stared at it. She saw the color, and all she could see was the emerald green dress Dario had ripped from her body. She saw the price tags, still attached. She saw the obligation. Dario used to do this. After a bad night, he would send her gifts, jewelry, clothes. He would dress her up like a doll, put her on display, and whisper to his friends, "See, she adores me. I spoil her." "No," Ariana whispered. Sophia's smile faltered. "I'm sorry. Perhaps a different color." "No." Ariana's voice was stronger, shaking. She looked at the racks, at the fabrics, at the assumption. This was not a rescue. This was a transfer of ownership. "I am not a doll," she said, her voice rising, cracking. "Ariana," Enzo started, stepping forward. "No!" she shouted, backing away, her hands coming up. "You think you can just buy me new clothes and I'm fixed? You think this makes you different from him? You're just dressing your new pet." The accusation hit Enzo like a physical blow. He saw his mistake. He saw the kindness of the gesture through her eyes. It was control. It was the same as his. I apologize," he said. The words felt foreign in his mouth, thick and heavy. I just thought you needed something to wear. I needed. She didn't know what she needed. She sank onto the sofa, her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. "Sophia," Enzo said, his voice low. Leave everything. Send me the bill." The stylist and her team vanished, leaving the racks of clothes standing like silent judges in the room. Enzo stood there, helpless, watching her break. He was about to say something, anything, when Marco, his driver, stuck his head through the open doorway. "Boss, the car is ready, but this is a circus." Marco's eyes flicked to Ariana's sobbing form and then back to Enzo, his expression full of disgust. "She's a landmine. You're letting her derail you. Just send her back. Tell Russo you found her wandering. Give him an apology. This isn't worth the war." The temperature in the room dropped 30 degrees. Ariana's sobs choked off. She looked up, her eyes wide with a new terror. Enzo didn't move for a full 5 seconds. He just watched Marco. When he finally spoke, his voice was not loud. It was the quietest, most lethal sound Ariana had ever heard. "What did you say?" Marco, realizing his profound error, paled. "Boss, I just mean, she's his wife. It's family business." "Get out of my house," Enzo whispered. "Boss?" Enzo moved. It wasn't fast, but it was absolute. He grabbed the front of Marco's shirt, yanking him into the foyer and slamming him against the wall. The impact shuddered through the penthouse. Ariana cried out. "She is not it," Enzo snarled, his face inches from the terrified man. "She's not property to be sent back. She's a guest under my protection. And you will never suggest returning a human being to that animal again. Do you understand me? If you ever imply she is anything less than a person, I will cut your tongue out and feed it to you." He held him there, Marco's feet barely touching the floor, his face turning red. "Do you understand me?" Marco nodded frantically, his eyes bulging. Enzo dropped him. Marco collapsed, gasping. "Go?" Enzo said. "You're off rotation. Get out of my sight." Marco scrambled to his feet and fled, the elevator doors sliding shut behind him. Silence. Heavy, ringing silence. Ariana was on her feet, pressed against the far window, her entire body shaking. She was terrified of him, of the violence she had just witnessed, the cold, easy promise of mutilation. But beneath the fear was something else, a hot, strange, and confusing spark. No one had ever defended her. Not as a person. Dario had defended her as his property, but Enzo had defended her humanity. She felt a dizzying, terrifying thrill. Enzo stood in the foyer for a full minute, his back to her, his hands clenched as he brought his own rage under control. He rolled his shoulders, adjusting his suit jacket. When he finally turned, his face was the calm, unreadable mask she was used to. He looked at her, trembling by the window. He looked at the racks of clothes. He looked at the mess he had made of everything. "I am going out," he said, his voice flat. He walked to the bar, poured a glass of water, and put it on the coffee table in front of her. "Eat something. From the kitchen. Whatever you want. It's just food." He left. She didn't see him again until long after the sun had set. She found him in his study. The door was open a crack. She hesitated, her hand hovering. She had eaten. She had forced herself to explore the kitchen, her heart pounding. But she'd made toast. It was a victory. She was wearing a pair of the black pants and a gray cashmere sweater from the abandoned rack. They were soft, and for the first time in days, she didn't feel naked. He was at his desk, staring at a map of the city, his face lit by the green glow of a desk lamp. "Enzo," she said softly. He looked up, surprised. "Why?" she asked, stepping just inside the room. "Today, with your man. That was more than just repaying a debt." He watched her, his expression unreadable. "He was disrespectful. He was disrespectful to you," she countered, her voice shaking but finding its strength. "He insulted your authority by questioning your decision. That's why you were angry." "You think so? But you said..." "What you said to him, that wasn't about your authority." She stepped closer. "It wasn't just about the debt. Why are you really helping me?" Enzo leaned back in his chair, the shadows carving deep hollows under his cheekbones. He looked at her, really looked at her. She was not the broken thing from the alley. She was not the sobbing woman on his couch. She was standing tall, in clothes he'd bought, challenging him in his own fortress. "The debt is real," he said, his voice a low rumble. "The call you made. Dario would have killed me that night. My family would have been thrown into chaos. You saved more than my life. You saved my entire organization. I never forgot it." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the glittering lights. "But you're right. It's not just that." He spoke to the glass, his back to her. "I don't owe anyone. Not my men, not my family, not this city. My entire life is built on the fact that everyone owes me. You," he said, turning to face her, "are the one exception. You're the single, unbalanced part of the equation." He walked toward her until he was only a few feet away. "Helping you. It's not about honor. It's not about war. It's simple. It's the only thing I've done in 10 years that feels right. It's the only debt I actually want to pay." She stared at him, her heart hammering. She believed him, and that was, in its way, more terrifying than anything. The moment was broken by the ringing of his private phone, a harsh, demanding sound. He snatched it up. "What?" His entire body tensed. Ariana saw the change instantly. The quiet confessor was gone. The dawn was back. "How many?" he snapped. "Where? God damn it, lock it down. I'm on my way." He hung up and was already moving, grabbing a set of keys from his desk and checking the gun he wore in a holster at the small of his back. "Enzo, what is it? What's wrong?" "Trouble," he said, his voice clipped. "A rival gang. They hit Il Corvo. Stay here. Lock this door. Don't open it for anyone but me or Leo." He was gone. The penthouse door slammed shut, and she was alone again, the echo of his panic ringing in the air. She did not lock the door. She couldn't. She waited in the living room, the racks of clothes like silent companions. She waited all night. She paced the length of the glass windows, watching the city lights blur and then, agonizingly slowly, soften into the gray of dawn. Every time the elevator chimed, her heart seized, but it was just the morning paper or the building staff. She thought about him bleeding in an alley. She thought about Dario finding out. She thought about being left alone, trapped in this glass tower. The sun was fully up when the elevator finally chimed, and she knew it was him. The door opened. He stumbled in, and her heart stopped. He was alive, but he was not unharmed. His suit was ruined, covered in dust and something that looked like brick powder. His left hand was wrapped in a bloody handkerchief. There was a long, shallow graze high on his temple, his dark hair matted with blood. "Enzo," she breathed, rushing forward. "I'm fine," he growled, pushing past her, heading for the bar. He was favoring his left side. "You are not fine," she said, her voice surprisingly firm. "You're bleeding. Sit down." He paused, halfway to the decanter of whiskey. He looked at her, at the command in her voice. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. He sat on the sofa, heavily. "The first aid kit," he grunted. "In my bathroom, under the sink." She ran. She found it, a professional-grade kit, and was back in seconds. She knelt in front of him, the kit open on the floor. "Give me your hand," she ordered. He unwrapped the handkerchief. It was a mess. A long cut, deep, across his knuckles. He'd punched someone, or something. "It's just a cut," he said, wincing as she poured antiseptic on a cotton pad. "It's filthy, and it needs stitches. Bianchi is on his way." "Then at least let me clean it." Her touch was gentle. She worked silently, her fingers deft as she cleaned the blood from his hand. His skin was warm. She could feel the pulse in his wrist, strong and steady beneath her fingers. She finished cleaning the cut and began wrapping it in a clean bandage. Their hands lingered, her small, pale hand resting on his larger, calloused one. He wasn't wearing his ring. She traced the line of a scar on his palm with her thumb, a small, unconscious gesture. He sucked in a sharp breath. She looked up. Her face was inches from his. His eyes, dark and intense, were fixed on her. The smell of him filled her senses, gunpowder, soap, whiskey, and the sharp, metallic tang of blood. The air grew thick, charged with the long night, the fear, and the adrenaline. She saw the cut on his temple. He hadn't tended to it. You're hurt here, too," she whispered, her hand leaving his to lift to his face. He didn't flinch. He watched her. Her fingers, still damp from the antiseptic, brushed the hair back from his temple. Her thumb grazed the edge of the cut. "Ariana," he whispered. It was a warning. She didn't care. She was so tired of being afraid. She was tired of running. He was the first person who had looked at her, really looked at her, in years. She leaned in. Her eyes fluttered shut. She could feel the warmth of his breath. She was going to kiss him. She wanted to kiss him. And then, shame. Cold and brutal. It flooded her. "What are you doing?" a voice screamed inside her. "He's a killer. He's just like Dario. You're just trading one monster for another. You are weak. You are pathetic." She gasped, pulling back as if she'd been burned. Her hand flew to her own mouth, and she scrambled to her feet, stumbling backward. I can't," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears of self-loathing. "I'm sorry. I can't." Enzo watched her, his expression pained. He stood up slowly, his body aching, but he didn't move toward her. He didn't force it. He didn't get angry. He just understood. He walked to her, and she flinched, expecting a blow, an insult. Instead, he gently cupped her face, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "Shh," he said, his voice rough. "It's all right." He looked into her terrified, ashamed eyes. "When you come to me, Ariana," he whispered, his voice impossibly soft, "it will be because you want to. Not because you're running from him, not because you're grateful, and not because you're afraid." He let her go, leaving her with the power. He gave her the choice he'd stolen from Marco. That night, after the doctor had come and gone, putting 4 stitches in Enzo's hand, they were both exhausted. "You can't sleep in that guest room," he said. "It's too far. I want you closer." I can't sleep with you," she said, her voice small. "I know." He gestured to his own bedroom, a vast, dark room with a bed that looked big enough for 4 people. "You take the bed. I'll take the couch in the living room. The doors will be locked, and I'll be right outside." She looked at the white, pristine sheets. She looked down at the sweater and pants. He understood. He went to his dresser and pulled out a plain, black t-shirt. "Here." She took it, her fingers brushing his. She disappeared into the massive ensuite bathroom. When she came out, she was swimming in his shirt. It fell to her knees, making her look small, young, and impossibly vulnerable. She climbed into the center of the bed and pulled the covers up to her chin. He watched her from the doorway. "Good night, Enzo," she whispered. "Good night, Ariana." He turned off the light and closed the door, leaving it open just a crack. He sat on the long, leather couch in the living room, the city lights his only company, and stood guard while, for the first time in 5 years, Ariana Russo slept without nightmares, The peace lasted less than 3 days. It was a fragile, glass-thin quiet that shattered at 4 o'clock in the morning with the vibration of Enzo's private phone. He was on the couch, where he'd slept every night. She was in his bed, behind the closed door. He grabbed the phone before the second buzz. What? It was Leo, his voice stripped of its usual gruffness, replaced by something grim. "Boss, you need to come. Now. St. Adalbert's." Enzo was on his feet, his mind instantly, chillingly clear. St. Adalbert's, the old Polish church in Pilsen, his family's parish. What is it? It's a message, Enzo. A loud one? A pause. It's Bobby DeLuca. Or it was... Enzo's blood went arctic. Bobby. His father's bookkeeper. A man in his late 60s who had been with the Moretti family for 40 years. A civilian, by all accounts. Where? On the steps, the front steps. They left him for the morning mass-goers. Enzo, there's a note. I'm 10 minutes out. He didn't bother to change his shirt. He grabbed his jacket, his gun, and his keys. He glanced at his bedroom door. She was sleeping. Finally sleeping through the night. He would not wake her with this. He would not bring this darkness to her. He left 2 of his best men in the hallway, doubling the guard, and rode the elevator down in a cold, silent rage. The sun wasn't yet a rumor. The streetlights cast a yellow, sickly glow on the scene. The police hadn't been called. Leo's men had secured the block. And there, on the wide, limestone steps leading to the church's heavy oak doors, was a shape under a dark blanket. Enzo stepped out of the car. Leo met him, his face pale. "Boss, it's bad." "He had the note in his hand," Leo said, his voice low. Enzo walked past him, up the steps. He didn't need to lift the blanket. He knew what he would see. He'd seen it all before, but this was different. This was not business. This was personal. This was sacrilege. "The note," Enzo said, his voice flat. Leo handed him a small, evidence-bagged piece of cardstock. It was thick, expensive. The kind of thing one used for invitations. In elegant, looping script, it held 3 words. "She's mine." Dario Russo had just signed his own death warrant. He had not only murdered a Moretti associate, a man who was essentially family. He had left him on the steps of Enzo's church, and he had done it in Ariana's name. "Clean it up," Enzo ordered, his voice echoing in the quiet street. "Get him to his family. Send them whatever they need. Double it, and get Antonio. I want him in my study in 1 hour." Enzo returned to the penthouse as the sky was turning a bruised gray. Ariana was still asleep. He showered, scrubbing the smell of the street and the metallic tang of death off his skin. He stood under the scalding water until his skin was red, but the coldness inside him wouldn't thaw. By the time she woke up, he was in his study, a fortress of mahogany and leather, sitting across from his consigliere. Antonio Falcone was a man cut from the old cloth, in his late 50s. He was slim, immaculate, and his mind was a steel trap. He had served Enzo's father, and now he served Enzo. "It is an act of war. Enzo, plain and simple," Antonio said, his hands steepled. "He's testing you. He wants to see if the new boss has the stomach his father did. He murdered Bobby, a man with no muscle, no beef, to spit in your eye." "I'm aware." "Antonio. And you know why he did it. He's not subtle. The note. She's mine." Antonio leaned forward. "The woman, Ariana. He knows she's here. He suspects." Enzo corrected. "Now he knows. And what do you intend to do? You've had her here for 5 days. You took his wife. In our world, that is a killing offense. There is no negotiation. You stole his property. She is not property," Enzo snapped, the same cold rage from the night he'd confronted Marco rising in his throat. Antonio raised a placating hand. "To us, no. To him? Yes. To the rest of the families? Yes, you have broken a cardinal rule. Enzo, for a woman who is not yours, a Russo. She saved my life. You've saved her life. The debt is paid. You gave her shelter. You got her a doctor. You have done more than enough. Now, it ends." Antonio's voice was reasonable, logical, and utterly ruthless. "Give her back." The silence in the room was absolute. "Get out," Enzo said, his voice soft. "Enzo, Listen to me. I am telling you as your father's oldest friend and your most loyal advisor. This is not about your pride. This is about the family. He killed Bobby. He will not stop. He will hit our businesses, our men, our families, all for this one woman. Is she worth it? Is she worth a war that will burn this city down? Get out, nah. Don't be a fool. Enzo. Don't be your father. Your father let his temper rule him. You are smarter than this. Send her back. We will claim we found her, that we were holding her for her own safety. We can smooth this. I am not giving her back. Enzo stood, his hands flat on the desk. This meeting is over. You will prepare us for war. That is your only task. Do not speak of her again. Antonio stood, his face a mask of profound disappointment. He will kill her. You know, the second you return her, he will kill her to make an example. But perhaps that is the cost of peace. Antonio left, closing the door softly. Enzo stood there, his entire body vibrating with a fury so pure it was almost calming. He didn't know how long he stood there, but a small sound pulled him back, a click, the sound of the front door. He moved from his study to the foyer in 3 long strides. Ariana was there. She was dressed in the jeans and sweater he had bought her. She had a small backpack, one of his, from a closet slung over one shoulder. She had packed the few clothes she had. Her hand was on the doorknob. She hadn't heard him approach. "Where do you think you're going?" She jumped, spinning around. Her face was ashen, her eyes wide with a familiar, hunted terror. But it wasn't fear of him. It was fear for him. She had heard everything. I'm leaving, she whispered, her hand fumbling with the deadbolt. "No, you're not." "Yes." Her voice shook, but she didn't look at him. "He's right. Antonio, he's right. That man, Bobby, he died because of me. He died because I'm here. He died because Dario is a monster. He died because you took me in," she cried, finally looking at him, her eyes streaming with tears. "I am a landmine. That's what your man said. I'm a liability. I am the woman who is going to get all of you killed. I won't be that." She turned back to the door, her fingers finally getting the lock to turn. She pulled the heavy door open. She took one step into the hallway, toward the elevators. Enzo's controls snapped. He crossed the distance in a second. He grabbed her wrist, his grip like a steel manacle. He yanked her back, hard, kicking the door shut with his foot. The boom of the door slamming echoed in the marble foyer. She cried out, stumbling against his chest. "No!" he snarled, his face inches from hers. "You are not leaving. You're hurting me," she sobbed, trying to pull her wrist free. He froze. He looked down at his hand, his large tanned fingers wrapped brutally around her delicate wrist. He was holding her exactly as Dario must have. The realization hit him like a physical blow, and he let go. But he didn't back away. He planted his hands on the door on either side of her head, caging her. "You leave now," he whispered, his voice shaking with a rage she didn't understand. "And you are walking back into hell. Is that what you want? I don't have a choice. You always have a choice. Running is a choice, and it's the wrong one. What am I supposed to do? Enzo," she screamed, her small fists coming up to beat against his chest. It was like a bird beating against a brick wall. Stay here and watch you bury your men? Watch this whole world burn down because of me? I am not worth that. I am not worth a war." He grabbed her hands, stilling them. "Stop. Just stop." She collapsed. The fight, the fear, the guilt, it all drained out of her at once. Her legs gave out and she sank. But he sank with her, holding her up until they were both kneeling on the cold marble floor of the foyer. She buried her face in his shirt, and her body was racked with sobs. He just held her. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her tight, his hand cradling the back of her head, shielding her. "He killed him. He killed that man. And it's my fault." She wept. "No, it's mine. I knew what this meant. I knew what he was. This is my war, Ariana. He just gave me the reason." She looked up, her face tear-streaked, her eyes shattered. "I don't want this," she whispered, her voice raw. I don't want to be afraid anymore." That was it. That was the sentence. It was not, I am afraid. It was, I don't want to be. It was a plea, not for rescue, but for change. He looked at her mouth, still swollen from Dario's ring. He looked at her eyes, full of a pain he was starting to feel as his own. He didn't think. He acted. He leaned in and kissed her. It was not a kiss of passion, it was a kiss of promise. It was soft, his lips brushing hers, a silent, desperate answer. It was a kiss that said, "You will not be afraid again." She gasped against his mouth, her hands, which had been trapped between them, sliding up to fist in his shirt. She held on, as if he were the only solid thing in the world, and she kissed him back. The kiss changed. The softness was devoured by a sudden, aching need. It deepened, becoming hungry, desperate. This was the fear, the rage, the guilt, the last 4 days of high-wire tension, all pouring out, his fingers tangled in her hair, tilting her head back. Her hands clung to his shirt, pulling him closer. It was breathless. It was trembling. It was not gentle. It was a drowning man finding air. They broke apart. Panting, their foreheads rested against each other. Both of them were shaking. He looked into her eyes, dazed. He had wanted to comfort her. He had ended up wanting her. Without a word, he slid one arm under her knees and the other behind her back, lifting her easily. She weighed nothing. He carried her from the foyer, through the living room, into his bedroom. He laid her down on the vast, unmade bed she had slept in. She looked up at him, her eyes dark, her lips red and swollen from his. She was terrified, but she was not resisting. She was waiting. He stood over her, his heart hammering in his chest. He saw her, the woman who had been property, the woman who had been beaten, the woman who had just confessed her deepest fear. He could take her. She would let him. She would let him do anything. Out of gratitude, out of fear, out of a desperate need to feel something other than pain. And that was why he couldn't. He reached down, but not for her. He grabbed the comforter and pulled it up over her, tucking it around her. He sat on the edge of the bed, his back to her. She waited. Finally, a small voice. "Enzo!" He scrubbed a hand over his face. He pressed his forehead to hers, leaning over her. His eyes were closed. "Not yet," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Not like this." He laid down on the bed, but on top of the covers, next to her. He was still in his suit. He turned onto his side to face her. She was watching him, her expression confused, relieved, and something else. Something tender. He took her hand, lacing his fingers with hers. He used to punish me," she whispered into the dim light of the bedroom. Enzo's body tensed. "Ariana." "No, I need to say it. You need to know." Her thumb stroked the back of his hand. "The beatings, they were bad, but they weren't the worst part. They were predictable. It was the other things." She was quiet for a long time. He waited. It was the control, the isolation. "After we were married, he took my car keys, said the wife of Dario Russo didn't need to drive. A driver would take me. But the driver always reported back to him, where I went, how long I was there, who I spoke to. Then he took my phone. He said he would pay for a house line. I didn't need a cell. Then he cut the house line." Her voice was flat, a recitation of facts. "He locked the pantry. He gave me an allowance, a cash allowance, like a child. I had to write down every dollar I spent. I once bought a brand of coffee he didn't approve of, and he made me return it. He made me stand in the customer service line for 20 minutes and beg them to take back the open can. Then he cut the allowance for a month." Enzo's eyes were closed. His jaw was so tight it ached. "I wasn't a person," she whispered. "I was just a thing in his house. This beautiful, perfect house, and I was the one thing that was always wrong. My hair, my clothes, the way I breathed. I learned to be quiet, to be small, to not be seen. And he still found me." A single tear rolled from her eye, down her temple, into her hair. Enzo caught it with his thumb. He opened his eyes. "My father," he said, his voice a low gravel. He was like that. He was a monster. To the world, he was a boss. He was respected, feared, but at home, he was just a bully. Ariana turned her head, her gaze locking with his. I grew up watching him hurt my mother, Enzo confessed, the words tasting like ash. He never hit her face, always her body, where the clothes would cover. He said a boss's wife had to look perfect. He let out a breath he'd been holding for 20 years. I was 12. He broke her arm. He said she tripped on the stairs, and I found the baseball bat he used. It was in his closet, and I swore, on that day, I swore to God that I would die before I ever became him. I swore I would never, ever touch a woman in anger. He looked at her, his soul bare. When I grabbed you, at the door. Ariana. I know, she whispered, her fingers tightening on his. You weren't angry at me. You were angry for me. It was the first time I felt safe. They lay there, two survivors, their hands clasped between them, until the city lights were extinguished by the dawn. He didn't take her back to the penthouse. The next day, he drove her out of the city, north along the lake. He drove for an hour, until the skyscrapers gave way to old-growth trees and massive, gated properties. He turned down a long, hidden driveway, the car crunching on gravel. He parked in front of a house that was not a mansion. It was an old Tudor, covered in ivy, its windows dark. Where are we? She asked, her voice soft. My mother's house, he said, killing the engine. She loved this place. After she died, my father. He never came here. He let it go. When I took over, it was the first thing I claimed. I fixed it. It's my retreat. No one knows I come here. Not Leo, not Antonio. He got out of the car and came around to her side, opening her door. He led her to the front. He pulled a single, old-fashioned brass key from his pocket. He pressed it into her palm. What's this? She asked. It's yours, he said. If it ever gets too much, if I ever get too much, if you need to run, this is yours. This is your safe house. No one will ever find you here. She looked at the key in her hand, the weight of it, the meaning of it. Dario had taken her keys. Enzo was giving her one. She threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his chest. He held her, his arms circling her waist, lifting her off her feet. He carried her inside. They spent the night there. The house was clean, warm. He'd had it stocked. She wore one of his shirts again. They ate toast and drank coffee he made in an old percolator. They didn't talk about the war. They didn't talk about Dario. They just were. He took the couch in the study. She took the master bedroom. Her hand closed tightly around the brass key. In the morning, he woke to a new feeling. Sunlight streaming through the window, and a softness. Ariana. She was kneeling by the couch, watching him. She was in his shirt, her hair a wild tangle, her bruises almost gone. You're awake, she whispered. I am now. She smiled, a real, genuine smile. It transformed her face. Before he could speak, she leaned down and kissed him. It was the opposite of their first kiss. This was not desperate. It was not fearful. It was slow. It was warm. It was sweet. And it tasted like coffee. She kissed him awake, and his hand came up to cup the back of her head, his fingers tangling in her hair. The kiss deepened, and a low groan rumbled in his chest. This was want. This was need. This was everything he'd been holding back. He shifted, pulling her partially on top of him. Her hand splayed across his chest, over his heart. He could feel her breath, her heat. It was intensifying. It was becoming the thing they had both held back. And just as it was about to cross the line, he put his hands on her waist and gently, but firmly, slowed it down. He broke the kiss, resting his forehead against hers. She panted, her eyes dazed. Enzo? Easy, he whispered, his voice thick. Easy. We have time. Let's have this. For one more day. Let's just be this. She looked at him, at the control it was taking him. He was giving her the power, again. She nodded, her smile returning, soft and intimate. Okay, one more day. The day of peace at the lake house was a stolen breath, a fragile bubble of quiet that could not last. They drove back to the city in silence, but it was no longer the tense, heavy silence of before. It was the quiet of a shared secret, a nascent understanding. His hand rested on the center console, and her fingers, on their own accord, had found his. They stepped out of the private elevator into the penthouse. The air was cold. Leo was waiting for them. He wasn't alone. Antonio Falcone, his consigliere, was with him. Neither man was smiling. On the massive, polished granite coffee table, fanned out like a losing poker hand, were the morning's papers, the Sun-Times, the Tribune, and 2 gutter tabloids. The headlines screamed at them. Mafia wife shacks up with rival. Dario Russo's whore trades lashes for luxury. The Moretti mistress. Below the block, letters were photographs. Grainy, long lens shots. One of Ariana, her face still bruised, looking out the penthouse window. Another of her getting into Enzo's car. And one, a chilling, impossible shot of them standing on the porch of the lake house. Dario's message was clear. I see everything. There is no safe house. Ariana's hand, which had been in Enzo's, flew to her mouth. The blood drained from her face, leaving her a sickly, pale white. She didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She just shut down. The light in her eyes, the one he had just coaxed back to life, was extinguished. He told them, she whispered. She stumbled forward, her hand reaching for a paper. Ariana, don't, Enzo commanded, but it was too late. She picked it up. She read the words. Vicious, ugly words. Adultery, betrayal, a known, unstable woman. Dario had painted himself as the victim, the cuckolded husband, and her as a treacherous, ungrateful whore. He's right, she whispered, the paper shaking in her hand. Look, this is what I am. The old shame, the voice she thought she'd quieted, was back. It was not a whisper. It was a roar. I'm not free, she said, her voice hollow, looking at Enzo with dead eyes. I'm just a different kind of prisoner. I'm your prisoner now. I'm your whore. That's all I am. That's all I'll ever be. Ariana, that's not true. That is the poison he's feeding you. But she was already shaking her head, backing away, dropping the paper as if it had burned her. I have to go. I made this worse. I brought this shame on you. She turned and fled, not to his room, but to the guest room she had first occupied. The lock clicked. Enzo stood there, his hands clenched into fists so tight his nails bit into his palms. His rage was a cold, quiet, killing thing. Boss, Leo began. I've already got men looking for the photographer. He's dead by sundown. This is a disaster, Antonio cut in, his voice sharp. Enzo, you have indulged this fantasy. You have harbored the wife of another boss. Now, you've made yourself a public spectacle. The other families, they see this. He gestured to the papers. They don't see strength. They see a man being led around by his, well, they see a vulnerability. She is a liability. Enzo turned, his dark eyes so cold Antonio instinctively took a step back. Get your men, Leo, Enzo said, his voice a low growl. Find the photographer. Find the reporter who wrote the story. Bring them to me. I want to have a conversation. Leo, relieved to have an order, nodded. And the lake house. Boss, only our inner circle. I know, Enzo said. Handle the press first, then we will clean our own house. Leo left. Enzo was alone with his consigliere. Enzo, you must listen to reason. Antonio pressed, his voice lowering. The woman is broken. She is a weight that will drown you. This affection, it is a weakness. You must cut her loose, send her away, somewhere far. It is the only way to save your reputation. The words hung in the air. Enzo walked to his study and poured 2 glasses of whiskey. He handed one to Antonio, then walked to the window, looking down at the city. You're wrong, Antonio, he said quietly. Enzo, I have served your family for 30 years. And you are a good man, but you are wrong. He turned, his gaze pinning the older man. That woman in the other room. She is more of a man than half my crews. She has endured things you cannot imagine. And she is still standing. She is a distraction, Antonio insisted. She is the opposite. Ariana was on the other side of the guest room door, her back pressed against it, her bag half packed. She was leaving. She would slip out. She had to. She had brought him shame. She was his liability. She was his weakness. She was halfway to the door when she heard the raised voices from the study. She crept down the hall, intending to tell Enzo she was leaving, to apologize. She stood by the study's heavy, partially open door, hidden in the shadows of the hallway. A weakness. Enzo, Antonio was saying. You must cut her loose. Ariana's heart broke. He was right. She squeezed her eyes shut, preparing to flee. Then she heard Enzo's voice. It was not loud. It was the quiet, lethal voice he'd used on Marco in the foyer. Do not ever call her that. The silence that followed was heavy. You want to know what she is? Antonio, Enzo continued, his voice resonating with a pure, cold conviction. I look at our world. I look at the deals, the lies, the blood, the filth we swim in, and I am becoming my father. I am becoming a man I do not recognize. He took a step toward his consigliere. That woman. She is the only thing in my life that is not covered in blood or lies. She's not my weakness. He paused, his voice dropping so low Ariana had to strain to hear it. She's the only reason I still believe in right and wrong. Now get out and do your job. Ariana slid down the wall, her hand clapped over her mouth to stifle the sob. It was not a sob of pain. It was a sob of release. He hadn't said she was his love. He hadn't said she was his passion. He had said something far more profound. He had said she was his morality. He had said she was his goodness. She heard Antonio's clipped, as you wish, Don Moretti. She heard him leave. She waited. That night, he found her. She wasn't in the guest room. She was in the main living room, standing by the great glass windows, watching the city lights blur through her unshed tears. He came up behind her. He didn't touch her. You heard... It wasn't a question. She turned. Her face was pale, but her eyes were alive. You meant it. I don't say things I don't mean. She took a single, trembling step toward him. I am not his. I am not what those papers say. I know what you are, he whispered, his own control fraying. He had wanted to give her time, to let her heal, but the war was here, and this was the only thing that made sense. You're Ariana, he said, his voice rough. She rose on her toes and kissed him. It was not the desperate kiss in the foyer. It was not the sweet coffee kiss at the lake house. This was a kiss of choice, of decision. Her hands came up to frame his face, her fingers digging into his jaw as if to hold him, to prove he was real. I'm not running, she whispered against his lips, echoing his own words back to him. And I am not afraid, not of him, and not of you. His control shattered. A low, guttural sound tore from his chest. He lifted her, one arm sweeping under her legs, the other supporting her back. She didn't gasp. She wrapped her arms around his neck and held on. He carried her past the guest room, past his study, and into his own bedroom. The room was dark, dominated by a massive bed covered in dark, charcoal gray sheets. He didn't turn on the light. The city glow was enough. He laid her on the bed with a reverence that made her heart ache. He didn't rush to undress her. He sat on the bed and simply looked at her, his gaze a physical touch. You are sure, he said. It was his final offering of an escape. I have never, she said, her voice shaking but firm, been more sure of anything. He moved. His hands were slow. He unbuttoned her shirt, his fingers brushing the skin beneath. He was unmaking all the damage Dario had done. His touch was not a prelude to pain. It was the antidote. He kissed her. A long, slow, deep kiss that tasted of whiskey and promises. His hands moved to her jeans, his touch gentle, questioning. She lifted her hips, helping him. He worshipped her. There was no other word for it. He kissed the pale skin of her stomach. His hand slid up her side, and his fingers brushed the faint, silvery line of a scar on her ribs. She flinched. A memory. A reflex. He stopped. "What?" he whispered against her skin. A bottle. He missed my head," she whispered, ashamed. Enzo's eyes closed. He brought his lips to that scar and kissed it. A soft, healing press. He kissed the bruise, now a faint yellow, on her jaw. He kissed her eyelids, her temples. He was not just making love to her, he was erasing the past. He was claiming every part of her, not as property, but as a miracle. And Ariana, she was unraveling. This cherishing was more overwhelming than the violence had ever been. He moved over her, his weight a comfort, not a threat. His dark eyes were locked on hers, seeing her, only her. When he finally joined his body with hers, it was a slow, profound, and perfect act. It was a joining of two broken souls, a silent vow in the dark, and she began to weep. Enzo froze, his body tensing. His worst fear realized. "Ariana, did I hurt you?" She shook her head, a strangled sob escaping her. She grabbed his face, her fingers digging into his hair, and pulled him down for a kiss. "No," she wept, the tears streaming down her temples. "No, it's just, no one has ever—" She couldn't finish. "No one has ever cherished me. No one has ever made me feel clean." She wept not from pain, but from the sheer, agonizing beauty of being cherished. He held her, his own control breaking, his body moving with hers, until the world dissolved into nothing but breath and skin and a shared, desperate release. The next morning, she woke to a feeling she had never known, safety. She was tangled in white sheets. He had changed them in the middle of the night, and her head was on his chest. She could hear the strong, steady beat of his heart. His arm was draped protectively across her, holding her even in sleep. The sun was streaming in, bathing the room in a clean, bright light. She was not a prisoner. She was not a whore. She was home. The peace lasted for 2 days, 2 days of stolen moments in the penthouse. They planned, they ate. They slept in the same bed, their bodies learning each other. Then the bubble burst. He had to go. A meeting with his captains. A show of strength, he'd called it. Dario thinks I'm weak. Hiding. I have to show him I'm not. He'd kissed her. A deep, possessive kiss that left her breathless. "Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone. I will be back in 2 hours. He wasn't. She waited. The clock ticked. 2 hours became 3. 3 became 4. She was pacing, her heart a cold knot of dread in her stomach, when his private phone, the one he'd left on his nightstand, rang. She snatched it up. "Enzo? Ariana?" It was Leo. His voice was raw, panicked. "Where is he? He's not picking up his cell. He's with you," she cried. "No, his convoy was... It was hit. On Whacker, a dump truck, an ambush. We can't find him." Ariana's world went silent. He was in a private room at Northwestern. The hospital was locked down by Moretti men. It had taken Leo's crew 20 minutes to cut him out of the armored sedan. The car had been rammed by a dump truck and then strafed with automatic fire. 2 of his men were dead. He was alive. Barely. A broken arm. 3 cracked ribs. A severe concussion. A dozen cuts from the shattered. Bulletproof glass. When he woke, his head pounding, the first thing he saw was her. She was asleep in the hard, plastic armchair next to his bed, her head on her knees. Her hand was wrapped around his, the uninjured one. She looked pale, exhausted, but she was there. He groaned, and her head snapped up, her eyes wide and bloodshot. "Enzo," she breathed, a wave of relief so profound it was almost painful. "You're safe," he rasped. "You idiot," she whispered, her voice breaking as she brought his hand to her cheek. "You absolute, reckless idiot. You almost died." "Dario," he grunted, trying to sit up. "He's fine," Leo said from the doorway, his own arm in a sling. "He thinks he won. He thinks he took you out. He's celebrating. Let him—" Ariana stood. She looked at Leo, then at the nurse who had followed him in. "I want a cot. In here." and I want a 24-hour guard on this door. Ma'am, you need to rest," the nurse began. "I am not leaving his side," Ariana said, her voice no longer the soft, hesitant whisper. It was cold. It was hard. It was the voice of a Moretti. The nurse just nodded and left. They returned to the penthouse 3 days later. Enzo was in a sling, his ribs taped, his face a roadmap of fading bruises and stitches. He was impatient, angry, and trapped. Ariana was different. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard focus. He was in his study, trying to sign papers with his left hand. When she walked in, he heard a sound, a metallic, final click. He looked up. She was at his desk. She was holding his spare pistol, a compact 9mm Sig Sauer. She had just released the magazine, checked that it was full, and slammed it back into the grip. Her hands were steady. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice rough. She looked at him, her eyes dark. "Dario taught me how to shoot. Years ago. He liked the way it looked, the contrast. A beautiful woman holding a deadly thing. He'd make me shoot at bottles at his estate." She shuddered, the memory passing over her. "But I never held it for me." She turned, her movements fluid, and clicked the safety on. "Show me again," she said. "Show me how to be sure. Show me how to use it so I don't miss." He stared at her, at the woman forged in the fire of his war. He stood, walked behind her, and his good arm came around her, his hand covering hers, adjusting her grip. "You breathe out," he whispered, his lips near her ear. "You keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire. You squeeze. You don't pull." "I know," she said, her voice flat. She stared at the far wall. "I will never be helpless again." That night, he was by the fire, nursing a whiskey, the sling discarded on the couch. She sat beside him. "What's next?" "He was sloppy," Enzo said, swirling the amber liquid. "He thinks I'm wounded. He thinks I'm weak. He's celebrating. And that's when he'll make a mistake. I'm going to end this." "How?" "Antonio wants me to hit his businesses, bleed him dry. That's not enough. This isn't about territory anymore. It's not vengeance." He looked into the fire. "It's pest control. I'm going to end the cycle. For my mother, for you." He turned to her, his gaze intense. "Which is why I'm sending you back to the lake house, with 4 of my best men. You'll be safe there until it's over." Ariana set her glass down on the table. She didn't look at him. "No." He frowned. "Ariana, that was not a request. This is my world. It's going to be a bloodbath. I am not letting you anywhere near it." She stood up. She looked down at him, her shadow cast long by the fire. The power dynamic, for the first time, was equal. "You don't get to—" "Enzo," she said, her voice quiet but unyielding. "You don't get to give me a key to a safe house and lock me away. That's what he did. You said I was the reason you believed in right and wrong. Well, this is my right." She knelt in front of him, forcing him to meet her gaze. "He didn't just try to kill you, Enzo. He spent 5 years trying to kill me. I'm just the one who survived. He thinks I'm his property. He thinks I'm your whore. I'm going to show him what I really am." He stared at her, at the steel in her eyes, at the woman he had saved, and who, he realized, was now saving him. "This is my war, too." The plan was born in the cold, blue light of dawn, in the fortress of his study. It was a plan of calculated, brutal risk. "He's arrogant," Enzo said, his voice a low rumble. He pointed a finger at a single date on his desk calendar. The Children's Hope Gala, one of the city's biggest charity events, an event Dario, in his quest for legitimacy, always attended. "He's wounded. He's angry. And he thinks I'm the one who's weak. He's expecting me to hide you." Leo, his arm still in a sling, stood by the window. "So we leak it. We let one of our less reliable men get caught. Let him spill that you're moving Ariana. Tonight, after the gala." "Exactly," Enzo said. "He'll think I'm moving her while the city is distracted. He won't be able to resist a personal grab. He'll hit the convoy." "It's a good plan," Leo agreed, nodding. "We'll set the trap on the lower Wacker Drive. We can box him in from both ends." "No." The word was quiet. but it cut through the room like a blade. Both men turned. Ariana was standing in the doorway, wrapped in his silk robe, her hair a dark tangle from sleep. She looked small, but her eyes were iron. "Enzo." "No," she repeated, walking into the room. She stood opposite him at the desk, planting her hands flat on the polished wood. "This isn't his move." Enzo frowned. "Ariana, this is my world. Let me handle it." "You're handling it wrong," she said, her voice shaking but gaining strength. "You're thinking like a boss. You need to think like him. You're setting a trap for a wolf, but Dario is a snake. He won't hit a convoy. It's messy. It's uncertain. He doesn't want your men. He wants me. And he wants to take me from you. He wants the humiliation. He wants the spectacle." Enzo's eyes narrowed. He was listening. "He'll be at the gala," she said. "He'll be there to show everyone he's not afraid of you, that your ambush failed to even scare him. He'll be drinking champagne and smiling, and that's where he's vulnerable." "What are you suggesting?" Enzo's voice was dangerously soft. "You walk up to him in a ballroom?" "Yes," she said. "That's exactly what I'm suggesting. I'm not bait in a car. I'm not cargo to be moved. I'm the woman he thinks he owns. I will be at that gala, and I will let him come to me." "Absolutely not," Enzo snarled, standing up. "It's too public. Too many variables. I can't protect you in a crowd of 500 people." "You don't have to protect me," she said, her gaze locking with his. "You have to be ready. He won't try to kill me. Not there. He'll try to take me. He'll try to talk to me. He'll try to put his hands on me. And when he does, you'll be there. And this time, he won't get away." "She's right, boss," Leo said quietly from the window. "He's a creature of ego. A convoy is beneath him, but taking her from you, right under your nose, at the biggest party of the year, that's his style." Enzo stared at Ariana, at the sheer, terrifying courage in her eyes. She was not the woman from the alley. She was not the weeping girl in his arms. She was a queen, and she was planning her own war. He gave a single, sharp nod. "All right, we do it your way, but you do not leave my sight, not for a second all night." "I won't have to," she said. "He'll find me." The ballroom at the Drake was a sea of black ties and glittering jewels. The ceiling was a riot of gold leaf and crystal chandeliers. The sound of a string quartet and the polite murmur of Chicago's elite filled the air. Ariana felt like she was walking through water. She was wearing a dress of midnight blue, a stark, elegant column of silk that left her shoulders bare. Her hair was swept up, showing the faint, faded yellow of the bruise on her jaw. She wore no jewelry, save for the diamond earrings Enzo had placed in her hands before they left. "Something new," he'd said. She was holding a glass of champagne she hadn't touched. Her hands were shaking. Not with fear, not entirely, but with a humming. Electric anticipation. She held her head high, her posture perfect. She was a target. Enzo was a shadow, a presence. He was across the room, near the bar, talking with a city alderman. He looked devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo, his injured arm out of the sling, though she knew he favored it. He looked like any other powerful man in the room. But his eyes never left her. Leo was dressed as hotel security, a bulky, unsmiling presence near the main entrance. She circulated. She smiled. She accepted condolences from women who had read the papers. "So brave of you to be here, dear." One had murmured. Ariana had just smiled, her eyes cold. She felt him before she saw him. The air changed. The lights seemed toe-dim. The sounds of the party fading. She turned, and he was there, materializing from a crowd near the terrace doors. Dario Russo. He was immaculate. His tuxedo was custom. His dark hair slicked back. A diamond glittered in his lapel. He smiled, a wide, white, predatory smile. He looked completely unharmed, completely in control. He held a glass of whiskey. He walked toward her, and the crowd parted for him. He was a shark, and they were the fish. He stopped a foot in front of her. His eyes devoured her, a possessive, appraising gaze that stripped her naked. "Ariana," he said, his voice a soft, velvet purr. It was the voice from her nightmares, the voice that always came before the pain. My love, you look thin. Hasn't he been feeding you? Her heart was a fist in her chest. She could feel Enzo's gaze on her, a burning weight. Dario, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. Look what he's done to you, Dario continued, his smile full of mock pity. He gestured to her jaw. Forcing you to come to this party, parading you around. It's shameful. A woman of your station, you're my wife. He reached out, his fingers tracing the bare skin of her shoulder. She flinched, but she held her ground. His touch was cold. Come home, Ari. I've been beside myself. I know you were confused. You were hurt. I'll forgive this. This little tantrum, this adventure. I know you missed me. Come home. Let me take care of you. He was manipulating her. The soft words, the apologies, the lies. He was playing the role of the loving, forgiving husband for the benefit of anyone who might be watching. He was telling her he was the victim. All the years of silence, of being small, of being afraid. They coalesced into a single, white-hot point of rage. She did not back away. She leaned in, and then she slapped him. It was not a small, hysterical tap. It was a full-bodied, open-palmed crack, so loud it echoed in the sudden silence. The string quartet stuttered to a halt, heads turned. Dario's head snapped to the side. The smile was gone. His face a mask of disbelief, then pure, unrestrained fury. A red mark was already blooming on his cheek. Ariana was breathing hard, her hand stinging. You lost the right to call me that, she said, her voice low and clear, cutting through the silence. The very first time you raised your hand. Dario's eyes, black with rage, met hers. He lunged. He grabbed her arm, his fingers biting into her skin, yanking her toward him. You ungrateful whore, he snarled, his mask of civility gone. You think you... Let her go, Dario? Enzo. He had materialized from the terrace shadows, his tuxedo jacket unbuttoned. His right hand was visible. It was holding a gun. Low. Pressed against his leg, but unmistakable. Dario froze. He looked at Enzo, then at Ariana, a snarl twisting his perfect features. He was trapped, and then, chaos. Dario shoved Ariana, hard, into Enzo's chest. Enzo caught her with his bad arm, a grunt of pain escaping him, but his gun hand remained steady. Dario pulled his own weapon, a small silver pistol from inside his jacket. No, Ariana screamed. Gunfire, not from Enzo, from the entrance. Leo, a man behind Dario, one of his bodyguards, dropped, a red stain blooming on his white shirt. People screamed. They dove for cover, a wave of panic and satin. Tables overturned, champagne glasses shattered. Enzo shoved Ariana behind a massive marble pillar. Stay down, he roared. He returned fire. Dario was using the crowd as a shield, backing toward a service exit. Another shot. Enzo cried out, a sharp intake of breath. As a bullet grazed his right arm, his gun hand, he stumbled, but didn't drop the weapon. Dario saw the hit. He smiled, a bloody, triumphant sneer. He raised his gun, not at Enzo, but at her. Enzo saw it. He fired, not a warning shot. He fired to kill. The bullet hit Dario in the shoulder. Spinning him around, he howled, a high, animal sound of pain. He clutched his side. He was already bleeding. She realized Enzo's ambush had hit him. He was wounded. Dario staggered, looked at Ariana one last time, his eyes promising murder. And then he was gone, disappearing through the service door as his last bodyguard fell to Leo's gun. It was over. The ballroom was silent, save for the moans of the terrified and the distant wail of sirens. Enzo sagged against the pillar, his gun smoking. He was breathing heavily. Enzo! Ariana scrambled to him, her hands hovering over his arm. It was bleeding, a dark crimson line staining the pristine white of his shirt. You're shot. It's a graze, he gritted out, grabbing her, pulling her behind him. Leo, get the car, now, go, go, go! He pushed her through the same service exit Dario had used, into the chaos of the kitchens, and out into the cold, screaming night. They were back at the penthouse. The place was a fortress, the heavy steel doors locked, the curtains drawn. The city and its sirens felt 1,000,000 miles away. The adrenaline had drained. leaving Ariana shaking so hard she could barely stand. Enzo was sitting on the edge of the sofa, his jacket and shirt discarded. The graze on his right arm was shallow but long, bleeding sluggishly. His other arm, his left, was bruised and stiff from where Ariana had been thrown against it. "Hold still," she whispered, her voice trembling. She was dabbing at the wound on his right arm with an antiseptic pad from the first aid kit. He just watched her. His face was pale, his jaw tight with pain. A tear, hot and silent, splashed from her cheek onto his arm, mixing with the blood. He looked up. Her face was a wreck. She wasn't the cold queen from the gala. She was just Ariana. He shot you," she whispered, another tear falling. I saw you get hit, and I thought he'd won. I thought," she choked on a sob, her composure shattering. "I thought I was going to lose you. I thought he was going to kill you, and it was all my fault. I made you go." She dropped the cotton pad and just crumpled, her hands on his knees, her forehead resting on his good shoulder, and she wept. She wept for him, for the men who had died, for the terror of the last few weeks. Enzo's good arm, the left one, came around her, pulling her close, his hand buried in her hair, holding her head to his chest. He held her, absorbing her shudders, his own heart hammering against his ribs. "Shh," he whispered, his voice thick and rough. He kissed the top of her head. "Look at me," she sniffled, pulling back, her eyes red, her face streaked with tears. He cupped her face, his thumb brushing away a tear. "You are not going to lose me," he said, his voice a low, fierce promise. "Not now. Not after I just found you." He pulled her to him and kissed her. It was not a kiss of passion. It was a kiss of desperation. It was salt and iron, the taste of her tears and his blood. It was a kiss that said, "We are alive." He kissed her with a raw, primal need, a claiming. His lips were rough, demanding, and she met him with equal force, her hands clinging to his shoulders, as if she was afraid he'd dissolve. He broke the kiss, but only to rest his forehead against hers, their breath mingling. "He's not done," she whispered. Her eyes closed. "I know. I'm still afraid. I know." He kissed her eyelids. "So am I." He lifted her then, his body aching, his arms protesting, but he didn't care. He carried her to the bedroom, to his bed, and laid her down. This was not like before. This was not a slow discovery. This was a desperate affirmation of life. They were two survivors in a storm. His hands moved over her, not with gentle worship, but with a frantic need to memorize every line, every curve. His mouth found hers, his good arm pulling her impossibly close, his grazed arm a searing reminder of what he'd almost lost. She met his desperation with her own. She clung to him, her legs tangling with his, her hands in his hair. This was not about love, not entirely. It was about survival. It was a frantic, primal need to feel life, to feel warmth, to feel him. It was slow, and it was desperate, and it was full of the unspoken fear that this could be their last night. They moved together, a silent, rhythmic prayer against the darkness, until the world outside, the war, and Dario Russo ceased to exist. After, they lay tangled, the white sheets a stark contrast to the darkness outside. The fire he had lit earlier was now just glowing embers. Ariana was quiet for a long time. Then, she slipped out of the bed, wrapping the sheet around her. "Ariana," he asked, his voice rough with sleep. She didn't answer. She walked to the closet, to the small duffel bag she'd had packed the day she'd tried to leave, from a hidden pocket in the lining. She pulled a set of folded, worn documents. She walked back to the bed. He sat up, his ribs screaming in protest. "What is it?" "I had a lawyer, a friend from college, draft these 2 years ago," she whispered, her voice hoarse. She held them out. "Divorce papers." He took them. I never signed them," she said, staring at the papers in his hand. I was too afraid. I kept them hidden. I thought just having them would be enough, but I was a coward. I was so afraid of what he'd do if he found them. What he'd do if I actually... She walked to the desk, picked up the heavy, gold pen he used to sign his orders, and walked back. She took the papers from him, spread them on the nightstand, and, with a hand that was perfectly, icily steady, she signed her name, Ariana Celeste Russo. She crossed out the last name, her pen stroke violent and black. She just signed Ariana. She handed the signed document to him. Enzo looked at her signature, then at her face. Her eyes were clear, her jaw set. He didn't say a word. He stood, his naked body scarred and bruised from the fight, and walked to the fireplace. He tossed the papers onto the glowing embers. They watched together. The edges of the paper curled, turning brown, then black. The words Dario Russo and Ariana Russo were consumed by the flames, dissolving into white ash. It was a quiet, symbolic, and absolute end. As the last piece of paper vanished, a phone on the desk vibrated. Not his, but a burner. Enzo picked it up, a text from Leo. His face hardened, the last trace of softness gone. "What is it?" Ariana asked, already knowing. "The hospital he went to," Enzo said, his voice flat, cold. "He was there for less than an hour. Got his shoulder patched, killed the doctor, and left." He looked at her, the firelight catching the cold fury in his eyes. "My men tracked him. He's not running. He's gone to his final stronghold, his estate, just outside the city." He walked to the closet, pulling out a fresh shirt, and began to dress, his movements stiff. "It's time," he said. "We prepare for the end." Dario's estate was a scar on the landscape, a 30-acre, high-walled compound of cold stone and reflective glass just north of the city. It was a fortress built by a man who saw enemies in every shadow. Now, the shadows were real, and they were coming for him. "He's in the main office. East Wing," Leo said, his voice a low growl. They were in Enzo's study, the penthouse now a war room. A detailed, blown-up satellite image of the estate covered the desk. "He has his last 12 men with him. They're loyal, they're paid, and they're terrified. They'll fight to the death." "Good," Enzo said, his voice flat. He was checking the action on his pistol, his movements fluid despite his taped ribs. "We go in hard, 2 teams, Alpha team, with me, through the front. Leo, you take Bravo team, cut the power, and come in from the service tunnels. I want this done in 30 minutes. No survivors." "Understood, boss." Leo nodded, turning to leave. "Enzo." He looked up. Ariana was standing in the doorway. She was dressed in black tactical pants and a simple black long-sleeved shirt. She had been listening. "No," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "This is where it ends. Ariana, you are going to the lake house. Antonio is waiting downstairs. He will take you. You will be safe." "He will not," she said, her voice quiet, but with the same unyielding iron he'd heard in the ballroom. She walked into the room, past him, and picked up the second pistol he'd laid on the desk. He grabbed her arm. "Ariana, I am not asking. This is not a discussion. I am not losing you. And I am not hiding," she said, her eyes, dark and resolute, meeting his. "I am not your mother. I am not a victim to be hidden while the men fight. You told me this was my war, too. Did you lie? This is not a war. This is a slaughter," he roared, his control snapping. "This is blood and body parts. This is not for you. This is only for me," she shot back, her voice rising to match his. "He is not coming for your territory. He's not coming for your money. He's coming for me. And you are going straight into his trap." "What trap?" "He knows you. Enzo. He knows you're a creature of pride. He knows you'll come through the front door. He's waiting for you." She took a breath, her hand on the pistol. "I go with you. I am not asking for your permission. I am telling you. I am the one thing he won't be expecting." He stared at her, at the absolute certainty in her face. He saw the woman who had slapped Dario, the woman who had signed the papers, the woman who had, in the span of 2 weeks, been forged into something harder than steel. "Fine," he gritted out, "but you do not leave my side. You do not fire. You do not move. You are my shadow. Understood?" "No." His eyes widened. She walked to the small duffel bag she'd carried into the room. She pulled out a lightweight Kevlar vest, She put it on, strapping the Velcro tight, a gesture of grim, final practicality. She put on a simple black coat over it, concealing the armor. You go first, Enzo. You create the chaos. He will have a safe room, a panic room in his office. He'll go there, but he'll only go after he knows you're inside. And how do you know that? Because, she said, her voice dropping, I helped him design it. She clicked the safety off the pistol and slid it into the deep pocket of her coat. I will be your shadow, but when the time comes, you will let me go. The drive was silent. A convoy of 5 black, armored sedans, their lights off, cutting through the dark country roads. Enzo was driving, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Ariana sat beside him, not as a passenger, but as a soldier. She wasn't shaking. She was unnervingly, terribly calm. She just stared at the road, at the darkness. He wanted to tell her he loved her. The words were a physical ache in his throat, but he couldn't. It felt too much like a goodbye. They reached the perimeter, the front gate. A massive, wrought iron monstrosity was dark. Power's cut, Enzo said into his radio. Bravo team. Status? We're in the tunnels, boss. Give us 2 minutes to the breaker room, Leo's voice crackled. Alpha, on me. We go in 30 seconds, he turned to Ariana. Last chance, stay in the car. She just looked at him. She put her hand on his, the one on the steering wheel. It's over, Enzo. One way or another. I'm with you. He brought her hand to his lips, his eyes closed, and kissed her knuckles. A prayer, a promise. 30 seconds. The estate exploded, not with light, but with darkness. The internal power died, plunging the compound into a blackness lit only by the moon. Enzo's team hit the gate. A small, tactical charge blew the lock. The sedans poured through, fanning out in a practiced crescent formation in the grand circular driveway. The front doors of the mansion burst open. Gunfire, bright yellow flashes from inside. Dario's men. Alpha, move, Enzo roared, shoving open his car door. He and Ariana moved together, using the car as a shield. The air was filled with the deafening, percussive crack, crack, crack of automatic gunfire. It was chaos. Bullets pinged off the armored cars. His men were moving, a dark, fluid wave, firing as they advanced. Ariana, stay behind me. Now, he yelled over the din. He grabbed her, pulling her against his back, and they moved up the wide stone steps, 2 of his men in front, 2 behind. A man on the balcony above them stood, taking aim. Enzo didn't even slow down. He raised his pistol with his good arm and fired twice. The man crumpled over the railing. They were in. The foyer was a war zone. It was dark, the only light coming from the muzzle flashes. Plaster exploded from the walls, a massive crystal chandelier, dead of its light, shattered from a stray bullet, raining glass down on them. Office, East Wing, move, Enzo bellowed. He kept her tucked behind him, his injured arm a shield, his right hand holding the gun. They moved through the opulent, garish house, a trail of gunfire and death. They passed bodies. His men. Dario's men. Betrayal. Leo's voice crackled in his ear. Boss, service tunnel was trapped. Gas, we're pinned. He knew. He knew we were coming. The transmission cut to static. Enzo's blood ran cold. He looked at Ariana. He knew. He knew you were coming, she corrected, her voice tight. Keep going, he's in the office. I know he is. They reached the East Wing, a long, dark hallway. At the end, 2 massive oak doors. Dario's office. Clear, Enzo yelled. 2 of his men kicked the doors open, tossing in a flash bang. It went off with a deafening boom and a blinding white light. Enzo was in the room before the smoke cleared, his gun up. The office was empty. It was vast, a 2-story library of dark wood, a massive desk at one end. Behind the desk, a wall of books. Enzo, Ariana whispered, her hand gripping his arm. She pointed, the wall. A section of the bookshelf. It was open, a dark, narrow gap. The panic room. Enzo moved toward it, his men fanning out. He was at the desk, his gun trained on the dark opening. When he heard it, a click, a gun, behind them. He spun. A man, one of Dario's, had come from a hidden panel by the fireplace. He was holding Ariana. His arm was wrapped around her throat, a pistol pressed to her temple. She'd been dragged in. She'd been his shadow, but one of Dario's men had been a better one. Enzo froze. His entire world, his entire universe contracted to the single point of that gun. The chaos, the gunfire, his dying men. It all vanished. There was only Ariana, her eyes wide with terror, her face pale. "Drop it, Moretti," the man snarled. He was sweating, his eyes wide with his own fear. "Boss, don't!" one of his men yelled. "Shut up!" the man screamed, pressing the gun harder. "Drop it, or I swear to God, I'll—" "Hello, Enzo. Dario." His voice, slick and cold, came from the panic room. He stepped out. He was in his shirt, his left arm in a sling, his shoulder heavily bandaged. He held a pistol in his right hand. He looked at Enzo. He smiled. You look terrible," Dario said, his gaze flicking to Enzo's ripped suit, the blood on his arm. "And you, my love." He looked at Ariana, his smile fading, replaced by a cold, possessive rage. "Did you really think you could leave me? Let her go." "Dario," Enzo said, his voice a low, lethal vibration. His gun was still up, but it was on Dario. A standoff. "Oh, no, I don't think so. I'm going to kill you. Enzo, I'm going to kill you. And then I am going to take my wife home, and I am going to teach her, very slowly, what it means to be disloyal." Enzo's world tilted. He saw it. He saw the calculation. The man holding Ariana was a distraction. Dario was going to shoot him. He couldn't lower his gun, and he couldn't risk it, but he couldn't fire. He was frozen. And in that second of his hesitation, Ariana acted. She was not a victim. She was not a hostage. She was a survivor. She screamed, a raw animal sound that startled her captor. And as he flinched, she drove her knee, hard, up into his groin. The man howled, his grip loosening for a fraction of a second. It was all she needed. She dropped her weight, breaking free of his arm, and she fell, but she fell with purpose. Her hand was in her coat pocket. Dario saw the move. He raised his gun, his target no longer Enzo, but her. Enzo roared, firing, his bullet hitting Dario in his good arm. Dario screamed, his pistol clattering to the floor. At the same instant, Ariana's captor recovered, raising his own gun to shoot her as she lay on the floor. A single shot, louder than the others. Final. It did not come from Enzo. The man who had held her stood, looking confused. He looked down. A small, dark circle was blooming on the center of his chest. He fell backward, his gun firing harmlessly into the ceiling. There was a ringing silence. Dario was on the floor, clutching his shattered arm, his face a mask of agony and disbelief. Enzo's men stood, stunned. Enzo's gaze was on Ariana. She was on the floor, on her side, her coat open, revealing the Kevlar vest. Her arm was extended, her pistol was in her hand, smoking. One shot, clean and cold. It was over. The gun fell from her fingers, clattering on the hardwood, and she began to shake. Not a small tremble, but a violent, body-racking shudder. The adrenaline, the terror, the sheer final act of it. It all hit her at once. Enzo was moving. He didn't check on Dario. He didn't give orders to his men. He dropped his own gun and fell to his knees beside her. "Ariana! Ariana!" He grabbed her, pulling her into his arms. She was ice cold, her teeth chattering. She buried her face in his chest, her hands fisting in his shirt. It's... She stammered, unable to form the words. "It's over," he whispered, his arms crushing her to him, his hand stroking her hair. "It's over. You're safe. I've got you. It's over." He held her tightly on the floor of her husband's office as the first distant wail of police sirens cut through the night. One of his men looked at him, panicked. "Boss, the cops." "I called them," Enzo said, his voice muffled in her hair. He hadn't taken his eyes off her. Dario looked up from the floor, his face pale with blood loss. You called." Enzo finally looked at him. His eyes were arctic. The anonymous tip about a madman, Dario Russo, who was found to have executed his own men, who was holding his estranged wife hostage, who died in a tragic fire while resisting arrest. Dario's eyes widened in terror as he smelled it. Smoke. "Enzo, Ariana whispered, grabbing his shirt. The fire. Just a little cleansing, he whispered. He stood, lifting her with him. My men are gone. The tunnels. It was a trap. It's just us. And him. We leave. The police find. What they find. He carried her out of the burning office, not looking back. The estate burned, a massive funeral pyre for a life of terror as they drove off into the coming dawn. Months later, the sign on the door was simple. The Haven. A fresh start for women. It was a small, 3-story brownstone in a quiet neighborhood, discreet, clean, and safe. Inside, it was warm. Sunlight streamed through the windows. Women were in a common room, drinking coffee, reading, talking. One was in a small office, working with a counselor. Ariana was in her own office, on the top floor. It was small, painted a soft, pale green. She was on the phone, her voice firm, professional. No, I understand the legal aid budget is tight, but this woman has nothing. You find the money, I'll hold. She had cut her hair. It was in a short, chic bob that framed her face. Her face. It was different. The shadows were gone. She looked alive. She looked strong. The sun had set. She finished her call, her last of the day, and packed her bag. She walked out, said goodnight to the night manager, and walked the 3 blocks to her apartment. It was a simple place, small, but hers. The walls were covered in books and photos of her with the women from the shelter, photos of the lake house, and 2, framed, of her and Enzo, one from the gala, a candid shot from before the chaos, both of them in profile, looking at each other, another. A simple selfie she had taken at the lake, her head on his shoulder. She poured a glass of wine, put on some soft music, and sat by her window. At 7 o'clock, there was a soft knock, not on the main door, but on her terrace door, the one that led to the fire escape. She smiled, her first real smile of the day. She unlocked it. Enzo stepped in. He wasn't the Don. He was in jeans, a dark sweater, his coat slung over one arm. He looked tired, but he smiled when he saw her. Long day? She asked. The longest, he said, his voice a rough, private sound he used only for her. He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her new, short hair. You smell good, like soap and coffee. And you, she whispered, holding him. Smell like you need a shower. He laughed, a rare, genuine sound. He looked around her apartment. He had funded the shelter, quietly, through a dozen different shell corporations. He had bought this building, but this was all her. He pulled her to the small table, which she had already set, 2 plates, a simple pasta, a bottle of red wine, 2 candles. He stopped, his hand on her waist. He looked at her, at the peace in her face, at the strength in her eyes. He had come here every week for 2 months just to sit in her world, to breathe her air. He did the one thing he had never done. He knelt. Ariana gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Enzo, what? What are you doing? Get up. He shook his head, his dark eyes looking up at her, raw, vulnerable. He took her hand. You saved me, he whispered, his voice thick. Not just in that alley, all those years ago, not just from Dario. You saved me, from my father, from the darkness. You saved me more than I ever saved you. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over. She knelt in front of him, her hands framing his face. We saved each other, she said, her voice breaking. She pulled him close, and she kissed him. A deep, slow kiss full of a future she had never thought she'd have. It was a kiss of candlelight and soft music, an absolute, unafraid peace. She broke the kiss, her forehead resting against his. Take me home, she whispered. He looked confused. This is your... She smiled, her eyes full of him. No, take me home. He understood. Home was not a place. It was not his penthouse. It was not her apartment. It was them. He stood, lifting her with him, and they left together, at last unafraid. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope it held you right until the very end. This story was a journey, and I'm so glad you were here for it. Where in the world are you listening from? I would love to know. Please leave a comment in English and tell me your thoughts on Enzo and Ariana's journey. And if you love this, please consider subscribing to Mafia Romance Stories for more. We'll see you in the next one.